Introducing bassist extraordinaire Keito Brown. If you were to see Keito perform, you would agree that his passion-filled performances are unlike any other. His musicianship, professionalism, and stage presence are not only top-notch, but unmatched. Keito has played bass, keyboards, and has sang for a long list of national artists. He has done movie soundtracks, live performances, and numerous studio sessions. He writes, records, produces, and performs for his own work as well as for other artists. We had a chance to catch up with Keito in the studio, doing what he does best, music.
One more time. Let's try that. Right here. That was chord right there?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah.
The way you move is such a freaky thrill. It's the way you do your thing. Love the way you twist and turn your body, yeah. You're like a puppet on a string. Y'all hear me now, come on, shake your baby.
Over the years, I've worked with a R&B singer by the name of Alexander O'Neill's out of Minneapolis. MD for him since about '85. During the course of those years, also MD for Sherelle. Did a short stint, summer tour, basically with Seals and Crofts back in '92. When I was back in the '70s living in New York, I hung out in New York, worked with a guy named Diodato, Brazilian jazz pianist. Jerry Mulligan, did a short stint with him. Kind of hung out and partied with the Brecker Brothers and David Sanborn. Did a stint with Cissy Houston, Whitney's mom. I remember when Whitney was a 13-year-old snot-nosed kid running around, kind of getting on everybody's nerves while we were downstairs trying to rehearse. About 2 years ago, I had a gig I was going to do, and I needed a bass player. Someone recommended Keith, or Keito, as we kind of know him back in the day, to me. And I called him up and said, hey, I got this gig coming up. I can give you these tunes. The gig's tomorrow. You got 12 hours to learn a show. And Keith showed up. You know, he had his act together. He stepped up to the plate, and you know, I didn't have to worry about, you know, the bass section. You know, that was slamming down in there. So, you know, he did what he was supposed to do. Come to a gig knowing what you're supposed to be playing. Yeah, when I had Keith on this gig, one of the requirements was that you had to play keyboard bass. Not a lot of bass players can do that. And there were a lot of Alex's stuff that was written by Terry and Jimmy. Has keyboard bass parts in it, and Keith showed up. He had the sounds, he had the feel. You know, the stuff was slamming. It was supposed to be like it was supposed to be. Everything was in the pocket. Worked great with the drummer. But I've also done some side gigs with Keith, and we've done like some jazz stuff. You know, kind of rock, even a little bit of country. And he's been able to just hang with all the different styles that, you know, that I've thrown at him for gigs that I've had to do.
I saw Keith one time playing behind Alexander O'Neill, and during the concert, Alex turned around and he looked at Keith and told him that he loved his bass playing, and it was a really good concert. And I think Keith enjoyed hearing Alex say that to him, and I honestly have never heard Alex compliment anyone during a performance. I have worked with James Ingram, Roberta Flack, Peebo Bryson, Robert Robinson. I've sang in the choir choir with Robert Robinson for about 10 years. I'm an original member. I sang with Excelsior Choir, who won a Stellar Award 2 years ago and also was nominated for a Grammy last year. I've also sang background vocals for Joey McIntyre. I've opened up for groups such as Tony Terry and Keith Washington. I've opened up for Jaheim, and I've also opened up for Casey and JoJo. With Keith in a number of projects, including a group that he put together called Fraternal Substance with his twin brother. I sang background for Ray Covington, which Keith was the bass player and sometimes keyboard player. We've also worked together in a group called The Review, and we are still together, performing around Minneapolis. And he's a very talented keyboard and bass player. He's multi-talented.
Well, my professional career was with the Sounds of Blackness, late 90s up to 2000, and like I say, it was a blessing to do that. And I worked with Karen White, Alexander O'Neill, Boyz II Men, just to name a few. Playing with Keith Brown, the world's greatest bass player. Well, we toured with a group called Illusion, top 40 R&B group, several months. Real fabulous time with Keith as bass players. Funkiest guy I know, lays the groove down, synth bass as well, piano as well. Awesome cat. We've also done some other gigs as well, which mainly he was the main driving force behind it. But overall, over the years, as far as bass, he's #1 in my book.
We took some time to talk to Keito about his musical career.
I guess I can say I was fortunate enough to, experience in recording back in the days where when you messed up when you were recording, whether you were playing piano, singing, there wasn't any cutting and pasting. There wasn't a computer where the engineer could, okay, that's good enough, and they can put it all the way through the song. No, if you messed up, you had to start all over and play it from the beginning, and I guess that really conditioned me as a musician and a performer. I think that's where a lot of the hard-working attitude comes in when it comes down to the production and things like that, being on both sides of the fence. Best moments in the industry. Man, I played with so many people, but a buddy of mine, Frederick Thomas, he's in a group called Natural Selection, and he basically gave me the green light to say, hey, I need a bass player, live production, and get this thing going. He's out on tour, he's got this hit song out. The single was released about 1989, and they played it all over the world. I mean, you can hear it everywhere, and it was a Here Today, Gone Tomorrow song. It lasted till about the late 90s, and it kind of fizzled out, but man, for him to ask me to be his bass player, we're still friends to this day, and we still write. I got a phone call from a buddy of mine, his name is Charles Hayes, extraordinarily just riveting. I mean, he plays guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, sings. He called me up and said he couldn't do a project for this music director named George Parrish. And George was the music director for Alexander O'Neill, vocalist, R&B vocalist. And we did this Orpheum Theater in Minneapolis. And I guess we did a short weekend tour with Frankie Beverly and Maze. And for me to be a part of that, I thought that was a plus for me to get experience and just the giant crowds, the giant theaters. I really enjoyed playing bass for him. I had to do keyboards with him too, so. But other than that was another one of those memorable times. I hope that the industry would recognize the live musicianship again, you know, where you had the bands that played, you know, and there was a real drummer. There was a drummer actually hitting his drums, and there was a guitar player, a bass player, and all the electronics on top of vocals, you know, throw them out. Just have it just 5 microphones, 5 musicians, and just pedal to the metal kind of thing. I just hope that the industry can bring that back, so.
And I hear her cry between the raindrops on her heart as I watch her die. It tears my soul apart. passing day, I feel my love fade away, never be the same.